So today I want to dive into creating a one-time password inside of our authentication flow. So if you're not familiar with this concept, a one-time password is just a temporary code that you can use to log in instead of having to provide your own password. So you can provide either your phone number or an email. Use that to log in. This will generate a one-time code that will be sent to whatever phone number or email you provided. And then that code is short-lived and you can now use that code to log in. So this can really improve security inside of an application. So in this example, we're going to be using Appwrite to manage our users, and we're also going to use the Appwrite web SDK to connect to all of this. So if you're not familiar with Appwrite, it's an entire backend as a service platform, and there's a lot of backend services that you can use with it. But in this specific case, we're just going to use the authentication service, and we're just going to use it to manage our users. And this is really going to make this process easy. Let's look at a high-level overview of how this works. So when we're not logged into our application, we're going to be asked to sign in with our phone. So I'm going to go ahead and enter my phone number. And when I click on send verification, we're going to trigger the create phone token method. Now, this method is going to go ahead and send off a one-time code to that phone number that we provided. Now, if this user does not exist in our Appwrite backend, and by user, I mean phone number, it's going to go ahead and generate a new user for us. So I'm going to go ahead and click on send verification, and this will redirect me to my verify page. And I'm going to wait for that code here. It's going to take a second. So I just got that code. I'm going to go ahead and enter that. So that's my code right there. I'm going to click on verify, and that's it. So that just signs me in, and that user was created in my Appwrite backend. So in my Appwrite console, if I refresh that, now we can see that new user. Now, before we get started, I did want to mention that we're going to build a simplified version of the demo you just saw. And the reason for that is the demo you saw has some extended features that would really add time to this tutorial. So I really want to focus on the simplified version of just learning how to set up our backend, how to send out that verification code, and how to actually log in a user. So we're going to really dumb this down. Now, if you want to actually use that code from that demo, we're going to use this GitHub repo here, and in the master branch, you're going to see the final code that we're going to build here. Now, if you want to see what you saw in the demo, go ahead and go into the all features branch, and that's where you're going to find the final code. Also, we are going to be using React to build this out, but if you're using a different framework, I would still recommend watching this tutorial if you're trying to figure out how to do this. There's going to be some React-focused things here, but the core fundamentals of how this works can easily be applied to whatever framework you're using. So stick through it, maybe skip some of the React parts, but a lot of this implementation is all going to be the same regardless of where you use it. All right, so now it's time for the fun part. Now, what we're going to do here is start completely from scratch. If you already have a project that you want to implement this into, or you have your own React setup, go ahead and do that. You can just skip through these parts, but I'm going to set up a project. I'm going to set up a couple of pages, and I'm also going to set up React routers. So we're going to skip through this part real quick, but I'm going to make sure that you don't miss a single step here. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to do is go ahead and create a new application, and I'm going to use Vite for this. So we're going to run npm create Vite latest, and we're going to go ahead and call this tut for tutorial. And I'm going to select React. If you're using another framework, go ahead and just follow along and modify your code. We're going to use vanilla JavaScript, and then we're just going to cd into our new folder. So from here, we want to install all the default dependencies. And let's go ahead and run our server just to make sure everything's working. So on port 5173. So here's our default React application. Now, what I want to do here is go ahead and take a minute to clean up some of the code. I want to remove all the styling, and I want to add in some of my own code here. So I want to just make sure that we have some basic styling implemented, and we just take care of some housekeeping. So first, I want to get rid of app.css. If you're following along, let's go ahead and just make sure we're doing all of this. Index.css, I just want to remove all of the styling. And inside of app.jsx, I want to make sure to remove all of this boilerplate. And for now, let's just say hello world like that. Let's remove all of these imports. We don't need this state at this point. And let's just take a look. So this is our application, very simplified right now. And from here, what I want to do is go ahead and just add in my own styling. So inside of that source code in the GitHub repo, go ahead and go into the source folder, and let's take the styling from index.css. So I just want to make sure our application looks decent, everything's actually aligned in a way. So I just added some basic styling, and we can just paste all of that in here. And inside of app.jsx, let's go ahead and add in a div, and let's add in some classes. So I'm using Cursor, so it's going to autofill a few things for me here. So if I ever add anything, I'll make sure to explain it. But let's add in the class of page container and the class of content card. So that was all in that CSS file that we just added. So in here, this is where all that styling is. So now our application should look something like this, just a little bit cleaner, and it's going to make it better to work with. Now, at this point, I want to add in some pages. So I want to add in a home page, a verify page, and a sign-in page. So within the source folder, let's go ahead and add these. And I'm going to create a folder called pages, and this will be home.jsx. And in here, we'll just use my shortcode. So React arrow function component exported. Let's go ahead and save that. So that gives us our home page. And we'll have one called signin.jsx. And we'll also use a code snippet. So React arrow function component exported. And that's our sign-in page. And we also need a verify page. So verify.jsx. Okay, so that gives us our 3 pages. So right now we just have some text here. And we also want to set up our routers. So we want to create some routing here. So let's do this like this here. So inside of our source folder, we're going to create a component called routes.jsx. And in here, we want to import create browser router. And we also want to add in route provider. So let's throw that in, route provider. And I'm just going to hit tab with cursor, and I'll explain what's going on here. So we're first going to create a router, and we created our first path that's going to send us to the home page. Now I'm going to hit tab. It's going to create the sign-in page and the verify page. So we'll go ahead and make sure we have all those elements. And we also want to import the pages that we just created. So home, sign in, and verify. And these are all of our routes. Now in here, instead of exporting our router, what I want to do is I want to create a new component called routes, and we're going to use the route provider, and we're going to throw in this router into our router provider here. Now from here, I can just go ahead and use this routes component inside of my app page, and that's going to create all the routes for me. I told you we're going to go kind of fast through this, but I do want to make sure I'm explaining every single section here. So inside of our app page, let's go ahead and import routes, and we just want to go ahead and update this, hit tab here, and now we should have our pages if everything worked correctly. Let's see, React Router DOM. So we have not installed this yet, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. We'll clear it, and we'll do npm install React Router DOM, and that should finish that up for us. And let's go ahead and run that server again. And now when I refresh it, we see our homepage. If I go to sign in, we see the sign in page. And if I go to verify, we should see the verify page. So that completes our routing. Before we can add in any functionality here, we need to make sure that we add in some forms here. So in the sign in form, we want to make sure to accept the user's phone number. And then in the verify page, we also want to add in a form to get that code from our user. So let's go ahead and modify this. So we're going to change this div to a form, and I will let cursor autocomplete some things for me. Other things I'll just have to override. So in our form, we want an input field, and the type is going to be telephone, so TEL. And then for our submit button, we'll just say send verification code like that. And I also want to add in an H3 tag, and this is just going to say enter your phone number. So that's going to be our basic form right there. Now we do want to add in some state here. So let's go ahead and add in use state or import use state. And inside of our sign in page, I do want to set up a phone number for my state. I also want to add in a handle submit function. So cursor's auto completing all this for me. Perfect. So we want to prevent the default. For now, I guess I could console this out. And then for my form on submit, we want to call handle submit right there. So that's looking like exactly what I need here. Now for the actual value here, let's go ahead and change the value of my form field here to phone number. And then on change, we're going to go ahead and call set phone number, and we're just going to update the state. So let's go back to the page, sign in, and here we can go ahead and enter our phone number. Now let's go ahead and continue by going into the verification page. So verify.jsx. So same thing here. Let's go ahead and change this to form. And inside of my input field, let's go ahead and add in enter verification code. For the input type, we'll accept text for now. Placeholder will be verification code, and we'll just say verified. So that looks good for me. And we also want to import useState. So let's go ahead and get rid of this. Let's create some spacing here. And inside of our verified page, we want to set that state. So const verification code, set verification code, and then we'll just leave that as an empty string. So we also need a handle submit function. So I'll just let cursor add that. We'll go ahead and hit tab, and we'll make sure to add that to our form. And then for our state, and I want to save this to fix some indentation, let's go ahead and add in the value, and the value is going to be the verification code. And then on update, we're just going to add in that verification code into our state. So let's go ahead and just leave it. We don't want the error at this point. I mentioned that we're going to create a very simplified version of what we saw in the demo. We're not going to worry about all the error handling. So I think this is good enough. So we're ready to manage our users now, and I'm going to do this through Appwrite. So if you don't already have an account, go ahead and go to appwrite.io and create an account. And from this point, you're going to need to create an organization and then a project. So you can go through those default steps, and it's really easy to set up. Now, Appwrite can be self-hosted, but Appwrite also has a very generous free tier. So you can have up to 75,000 monthly users on the free tier. So I think that's more than enough for us to create a project and test with this. So Appwrite Cloud just really makes this easier. Instead of having to set all this up and self-host, it's going to make the tutorial much simpler too. So once you create your organization and project, this is what your project dashboard should look like. So in here, we have our auth tab. This is where we're going to manage all of our users. And under the overview tab, at this point, let's go ahead and first set up the Appwrite Web SDK. So from here, let's go ahead and just let Appwrite know that we want to use the Web SDK, give it a name. I'm going to call it my app. And then we're also going to add in a host name. So this is for course configuration. When you're connecting to your Appwrite backend, you want to let Appwrite know where you're porting in from. So we want to make sure that localhost is allowed here. And let's go ahead and hit next. And at this point, we're just going to go ahead and skip through this because I'm going to do all of this manually here. So that added the Web SDK. I should see it right here. And let's go into our project now. And from here, let's go ahead and install the Appwrite Web SDK. So we're going to run npm install, and we'll just add in Appwrite. So that'll get that set up for us. We'll just run the server. And in order to configure this, we're going to add all of this inside of the source folder, inside of a folder called lib, and then inside of a file called appwrite config.js. So let's just take care of some housekeeping here. So first thing we want to import is the client instance here. So the client class to create the client instance. And we also want to import account, and that's coming from Appwrite. Now from here, I'm just going to go ahead and hit tab here. We're going to create a client instance. Then we want to set our endpoint, and typically you want to put these inside of environment variables, but for now, we're going to put this in here, and I want to add in my project ID. So I want to make sure I have the right project ID. That can actually be found up here inside of the overview tab or under settings, and here is where you see that endpoint. So let's go ahead and grab my project ID, make sure you get yours. And from here, I also want to set up my account instance. So the account instance is going to use this account class right here, and we pass in the client to it, and we also want to export it. So the account instance is what allows us to manage our current users. So we can sign in, we can register a user, and we can also sign out of our application, basically anything that has to do with the user side of our application. So we set up our basic Appwrite configuration, and let's go ahead and close that out, and we'll go into sign in here, and we want to start adding in this functionality. So from here, let's first import our new account instance because this is how we're going to trigger this. So we'll import account from lib and Appwrite config here. Then inside of the handle submit function, let's go ahead and kick things off by making this an async function. I'll remove this phone number, and let's start with a try catch statement. And I just want to console out the error here. And from the try statement, this is where we want to send off that verification code. So what's going to happen here is we're going to call that create phone token method, and that method is going to send off a one-time code. But in the response, there is going to be a token with some information about our user and the token itself. So let's go ahead and check this out. So first, we want to get that response. So we're going to call token, and this is going to be equal to await, then account.create phone token. It looks like cursor doesn't fully understand all the methods. So this is why we need to import the account method or instance, because now we're going to go ahead and call create phone token from that account instance. Now, this method here is going to take in two parameters. So the first one is going to be ID unique. So we're going to hit tab. We're going to use that here. And we also want to import that. So I just want to make sure that we add that in. And that's coming from the Appwrite SDK. So this is going to generate a unique ID for me. Now, the second parameter is going to be the phone number. So we're going to hit tab here. That's going to be the phone number from our state or our form. And then we're going to console out that token. So let's give this a shot here. So at this point, I should be able to go ahead and test this out. So I'm going to add in my phone number. So we always need to add in the country code. So mine's going to be 1, and then I'll enter the phone number itself. So before I hit send, I want to inspect element, and I want to check out what this response looks like. So let's just make sure it worked. And here we see this JSON blob. So we see when the token was created, we see the ID of the token, and then we also see this user ID. So if I go into my Appwrite console now, I can actually see this new user added here. So I'm going to make sure my phone number is blurred out. But before we do this, I just want to go ahead and delete this specific user. And we want to continue from here by using this temporary fake phone number that we can use. So this mock phone number. So I'm going to go ahead and take this. We can rotate it. And we're just going to use this from now on. So I'm going to copy this. And let's just go ahead and refresh this. Let's go ahead and paste that in. We'll hit enter or submit. And here we go. Now we're using that mock phone number. So this is good for testing. If you're using your own phone number, you might get rate limited if you're using this too much, or there might be some other issues. Maybe you have to pay for individual text, whatever your situation is. A mock phone number is very useful. So we have the mock phone number. We see that token sent out. And then we also have a mock verification code that I'm about to use. So let's go ahead and finish this up. So in our sign-in page, we generate that token, but now we need to proceed. So we create the token, and what I want to do is I want to redirect my user to the verification page. So I want to import use navigate from React Router DOM. Then I just want to go ahead and set navigate to use navigate. And once we generate that code, let's go ahead and redirect our user. So we're going to navigate our user to verify, but I want to use backticks here because I want to redirect my user with the token user ID. So in here, we can see the user ID that was generated. So now I want to redirect my user to the verify page with the token. So in verify.jsx, we're going to go ahead and import a few things to first get the user ID. So I want to import use search params, and I'll hit tab here to add this in. So search params coming from use search params. And then I want the user ID, not the token. So we'll do user ID, and I just want to make sure that that's how I sent it. Okay, so that's where that needs to be updated. So we're passing along the user to the verify page with this user ID value, and now we're just going to go ahead and get that. So once we have that, we also want to import navigate, or we want to set up navigate because we do need to handle some redirecting here. So const navigate, and that's coming from use navigate, which we'll also make sure is imported right here. So navigate uses use navigate. And then inside of handle submit, we also want to write a try catch statement. So let's quickly just test this out. So let's go into our backend. Let's take this mock number. We'll refresh it and we'll add that in. So when I hit send, it should redirect me. There we go. So now we're on the verify page. So now in order to verify this, I'm going to need my user ID. So let's go ahead and create that try catch statement. So try catch, and let's just quickly console out the error as well. Now I also want to make sure this is an async function. And from here, we can now use that code and user ID to generate a session. So we're just going to go ahead and create a session. This is going to be await account.create session. And in this session, we're just going to pass in the user ID and the verification code. So at this point, I just want to console out the session. So before we redirect our logged in user, let's check this out and just see how it works. So we should generate a session from the user ID from the search parameter and then the verification code from the form. So let's go ahead and take this verification code and let's go ahead and hit submit or verify. And I should see this in the console. Let's see, account is not defined. So let's import that. Import account, and that's going to be from lib and Appwrite Config. And what I actually want to do here is go ahead and generate a new phone number and code here. So let's go ahead and create a new one here. We'll hit update just to make sure we have a fresh start so nothing else interferes. So let's go ahead and enter that phone number. So now we can enter the code. Let's go ahead and get that. And we'll hit verify. And here we go. This is that session. So the session object is right here. Now it's actually set inside of our cookies and local storage. Appwrite takes care of all of that for us. So at this point, I actually want to show you a little issue that can actually occur. So let's go ahead and start with a sign-in process again. So right now, we actually have an active session. So if we go into the auth tab, this is our user. If we go into sessions, we see that we have an active session. Well, what happens when we try to log in with this user again? So let's go ahead and get that mock phone number again. So we're going to sign in with this user again while we have a session. We'll hit send. It's going to send that verification code. Then when I want to use this session, let's click verify. And we're going to get this error. So it says creating a session is prohibited when we have an active session. So what we could do here is simply delete the current session, or we can just check if we have a user. If we are currently logged in, then we redirect a user back to the home page or whatever page that we're going to. So let's just add in that check just to make sure that we don't accidentally run into this issue. So what I'm going to do here is in the verify page, I'm just going to check this in the beginning. So instead of deleting a session, I'm just going to call use effect here. And we're going to make sure that we have the active session. So I'm going to call get user. I like that it just automatically knows what I'm trying to do. We're going to call get user. We're going to call account.get. And we're simply going to redirect a user if we have one. So we're going to call navigate. We send the user to the home page. And then when we don't have a session, but we finalize that login process, we also just want to call navigate and redirect a user to the home page. So this little check right here should make sure that we don't have this error. So if I try to go to sign in, it'll let me. I could also add in that condition before this, but at this point, let's just try it. We go to the verify page, it redirects us. So that's just a very simplified version of that. So let's go ahead and just get our current user. Let's finish this up. At this point from the home page, we can just go ahead and render out the current user that we have. So we'll go into home.jsx, and I'm going to kick things off by making a few imports here. So we want use effect, and I also want use state. So that looks good. Then I also want to import account. So we want to get our user. That's coming from lib Appwrite Config. And I also want use navigate from React Router DOM. So let's go ahead and set up that user state. So we'll set user and set user. Then I want to add in navigate. I just don't like the autocomplete, so I'm going to only complete some of these. So let's go ahead and remove get user here. So we have use effect and we have navigate set up. So get user is going to be created outside here. So we're going to call get user, and we're going to write a try catch statement that gets our user and sets our user. So that looks like what I need here. And we're going to call get user. So from here, I also want to get some loading state. So we're going to call is loading. And then inside of our get user method, we're going to call set loading to true. And then I also want to add finally set loading to false here. So this auto completed to is loading. If we are loading, we're going to call or just render or returning out loading, just some text here. And if we don't have a user, so let's just add this in. So if not user, then we just want to return user not found, please log in. So that creates our first condition. So either we're loading or we don't have a user. Now, if we do have a user, we just want to go ahead and render out hello, and we might not always have a username. So what I'm going to do here is go ahead and check if we have a name, then let's render out user.name. Now, if we don't have the username, we're going to sign in with our phone number. We're just going to call user.phone like that. So a name or a phone number. So let's check this out. And here we go. We see that phone number. Now, within our user, if I want to update this just to see how this is working, even with a mock number for a fake user, we can just add in a name. So I'll just add in Dennis Ivy. We'll hit update. And now if I refresh the page, there we go. We see hello, Dennis Ivy. And this completes our Appwrite OTP sign-in process. So that's it for this video. I hope you learned something. If you did, make sure to give it a like. Be sure to subscribe to the Appwrite YouTube channel, and I'll see you all in the next video.